CRM,
CRM.
CRM, customer relationship management. It is an old topic and a new topic at the same time because there's a lot happening. And today on episode number 124 of CXOTalk, I am speaking with Larry Augustin, who is the CEO of SugarCRM. I am Michael Krigsman, and my usual co-host, Vala Offshore, is out there in the ether. Vala, if you're listening to this, send us a sign. But in the meantime, Larry, how are you?
I am doing well, Michael. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Well, it's very exciting. You know, I've been following SugarCRM for a long time, and you've had a pretty interesting career in your life. And so let's begin by, please tell us about your professional background and the things that you've done.
Great. So I've been in technology for a long time, over 20 years in business roles. My background is actually as a technologist. I've got a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford. Think primarily computer science. I started my career literally as a system administrator when I was in college. That was one of the ways I worked jobs in college, and went on from that to start a company called VA Linux right out of Stanford. Took that company public in 1999 at the height of the bubble. Along the way, had a chance to do some exciting things with that business. We created an internet site called sourceforge.net. Some of your viewers may know at the time it was the largest site devoted to free software and software downloads on the internet. Huge change in that industry. Also ran a whole set of websites as part of that. Linux.com, Slashdot, some of them you may know from the technology and open source worlds, was part of coining the term open source. Spent a lot of time building that company. As I said, took it public. Post that, was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with a whole set of great entrepreneurs, people like Mark Fleury at JBoss, worked with ZenSource, Spring, company Hyperic, a whole set of great companies that were acquired or continuing to build great businesses. One of the companies I got involved with during that period in my career was SugarCRM. I came in shortly after the first investors came into the company and joined as the first independent on the board. This was late 2005, and then in 2009, we were looking to take the next steps with the company, and I really, really liked the market and what I had learned about CRM, and 2009 stepped in as CEO.
So give us a brief sense of SugarCRM. Tell us about Sugar.
Great. So as I said, the company's been around since 2004. The founding team came out of Epiphany, if you remember that company, in the CRM and marketing automation space. And at Sugar, we really saw here the opportunity to create what I'll call the next generation of CRM. As we look out there, I think the history of CRM has really moved to a point where it has to help the salesperson do their job a lot more. It has to really help them be effective. And we don't see that as the history of CRM. And it hasn't been the legacy. And it was time to make a change with that. And we really saw an opportunity for innovation in the space. And also, if you look at the companies in the space today, most of them aren't focused on just CRM. They tend to be large companies, of which CRM is a piece. And we really felt there was an opportunity to create a pure play focus that was really all about customer relationship management and innovating there. And we've had great success with it. Almost 600 people in the company today. Our largest customer is IBM. They use us everywhere with CRM. Around 7,000 customers total. So we've been thrilled with the success.
So Larry, you kind of described a little bit about the definition of CRM, but what is CRM?
That's a good question, Michael. That's one of those topics that is always an interesting one to go into in the CRM world, because you take it sort of at the meaning of the acronym customer relationship management, and there's a little bit of a misnomer in that, customers don't really want to be managed, right? And yet we talk about customer relationship management. CRM, as we really see it, is about creating a great experience for the customer. It's how can you put in place business process, tools, technology, attitude, all of those things to help a business deliver a great experience. You know, people ask me all the time, kind of, what do you do as a business, who don't really know the acronym CRM. And the way I describe it is, every business has customers. I kind of nod. Yes, that's good. We have customers. Okay. So imagine in that business, a person, an employee, is talking to a customer prospect. How do you make sure that in that conversation, that employee is delivering value to that customer prospect, that knows who they are, that isn't forcing them to repeat themselves and tell their story over and over as they talk to different employees? How do you make sure that that experience that they're delivering is consistent across your whole business? Every employee, regardless of who they are and where they are, knows when they talk to a customer, they know what to say to them, they know who they are, they really create for them the sense that the business understands them and cares about them. And CRM is about helping your employees do that. Part of it is technology, but part of it is also just the business process, the rules, all the things you want to put in place to help those employees do it.
Okay,
That's
Larry.
how I think about it.
Okay, Larry, so historically, CRM has really focused, it seems, on being a management tool. And now you're linking it to customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you're broadening the scope of CRM to go beyond technology into processes and culture and interactions with customers. So draw that line more tightly for us.
Yeah. You know, if I look at the history of CRM, I sort of think of CRM having come out of three areas. You know, one is, if you go back to the 60s and 70s, the economy was very manufacturing and operations driven. And that gave rise to manufacturing resource planning, MRP, and ultimately ERP systems. And those systems started extending towards the customer. And for the purpose primarily of inventory control and manufacturing planning. So their job was forecasting, right? It was tell me forecast so I can plan to manufacture, right? And that was one sort of core or one of the, I guess I would call the three elements that began creating CRM. The second was the database marketing revolution that happened in the mid-'80s. And this is where we began learning to take databases of target prospects and understand their demographics and market to them directly. So it became much more about relationship marketing and marketing to people and demographics as opposed to just sort of broad branding, right? So there was this aspect of I got to create a list, a targeted list, a database, know who the people are, and really understand who they are and go after them. So that second concept. And it was kind of this third concept that began to appear in the 80s, and that was the notion of contact or activity managers. And if you remember ACT, right? Most people don't necessarily realize this, but ACT, one of the things where that name came from was activity control technology. It was about activity. So you kind of had these three concepts that came together and really were the foundation of CRM through the 90s. Forecasting, operations, activity tracking, and the database of people.
Yes, you pop it all into a database and now you can look up and see what you've done. That's right.
And you've got kind of those three things to come together. And so the systems that really sort of appeared out of the 90s did those well. Forecasting, what is my, an activity? So how many sales calls has someone gone on? How many meetings have they done? So all that activity management, and then just the database. It was interesting when I first took this job, I was talking to a prospect and they asked me the question, so Larry, are you the CRM or are you the application? And the question completely threw me. I didn't understand the question. As I dug deeper, I discovered that to him, CRM was the database, the customer list. And in fact, they had bought a CRM solution and they were just using it for the database, the customer, the name, right? The customer record. And they bought a completely separate piece that was an add-on app that became the front end for that. And it's that whole, disconnect in the legacy systems today that I think we're seeing a change from the industry. And you see this in a broad way across the industry in terms of people creating solutions around sales effectiveness, sales enablement. And they're much more about talking to the customer as opposed to recording what happened with the customer or recording activity. And that, I think, is a big shift. Sometimes we call this a shift from a system of record to a system of engagement, right? And that's where you can begin to affect the customer experience as you look and say, how can I help the customer engagement, not just record data about the customer? And it's that shift where you begin to say, okay, I've got all this data. Okay, now how can I use it to enhance that experience and make it part of activity? Because that's where you really touch the customers during the activity. And the system has to be useful at that point in order to affect experience.
So how can you use this type of system to help improve the engagement that you have with a customer? And presumably then that's going to improve the relationship, the actual relationship with the customer, and
Right.
ultimately therefore drive customer satisfaction and drive sales.
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways. One is you can take this information and provide information and intelligence that's valuable to the customer at the point in time when you're talking to them. So on the sales side, it can be something as simple as cross-sell, upsell capabilities. So we see customers, for example, in insurance. I've got a customer who's got life insurance, but that person should also have health, auto, home. Let the sales agent or the person that's talking to the customer see the right policies, the right products that are a fit. So you're not trying to fit the wrong thing to them. You understand this person is married, they have teenage children. Okay, what have you done about the teenagers' auto insurance, right? So it's helping the agent who's talking to the customer with intelligence about the right things, because we all know what it's like to get the sort of wrong product. It's just a waste of our time. We just know that. On the other hand, something that's useful makes a difference. Now it can be that's a sales example, but it can also be in customer support. It can be in follow-up. Really understanding what matters to the person, and a system presenting and offering the alternatives to the person who's engaged with that customer. So that's one set of offering that intelligence. That's one thing. Another is really enabling the handoff between functions across a company. It's interesting. So companies are organized: sales, marketing, operations, support, etc. That's how we all organize our businesses, by these functional areas. But think, Michael, when was the last time you bought something and you thought, gee, today I'm going to be a lead. And when I'm done being a lead, I'll go talk to the salesperson and I'll talk to the sales team. We don't, as buyers, we don't view companies in silos like that. And our buying experience and the way we buy is very different than the organizational boundaries. As a buyer, we don't really care about those organizational boundaries, right? We want a seamless experience. And you as a company have happened to say, well, this part is handled by a salesperson, or this part was marketing and this part was service and support. That's your problem as a company. That's not my problem as a buyer, right? Well, a system that makes the transitions inside a company look very seamless, so that the right information passes from person to person in a seamless, consistent way, and also helps people inside the company understand where the buyer is in their process, so they can appropriately align the conversation. That can have a huge impact in creating a great and consistent customer experience. So there's that mismatch between organization and the way people buy that a system can help smooth out. Those are a couple examples of how you can really operationalize and create that experience.
So Larry, SugarCRM is a technology company, and yet when you start to bring in these elements of technology, of process, and thinking about the customer from the customer's point of view, rather than through the silos of the organization, these are not technology issues. These are business issues. And so how does that then play out in all of this?
Yeah, no, you're right. These are business issues, right? And in our business in CRM, it's about creating a great customer experience, and it's not about just the technology. You really have to think of this as a business problem. And it's an interesting question because I've seen many startups in Silicon Valley, been lucky to be part of many successful ones, and even at SugarCRM here, I've seen a bit of this transition. Most Silicon Valley startups start as technology companies. We tend to be technologists here, and that's where we start. But you have to make the transition to understand that people aren't just buying a technology. They're trying to solve a business problem, right? And you have to deliver that complete business problem solution. And we've put a big emphasis on that here in terms of moving that direction. And I really think that the market today around CRM is looking for someone who's a CRM and business process expert and not just a technology delivery vehicle, right? It's not just about product, it's about all of those pieces. One of the things that we did here specifically, by the way, because of that process is we went and acquired some advanced workflow technology that is now core to our product. And it's really about creating processes across the business and managing those, because we really saw this concept that it was not just sort of isolated pieces, but you had to create process, and process becomes a key important part of any CRM initiative.
So when you think about CRM initiatives as you described, adoption is always an issue. So if a company is undertaking a CRM program, CRM initiative inside their organization, what are the things that you can do to encourage adoption?
Yeah, historically, adoption's been a huge challenge for CRM. And if you look at some of the statistics, they're not good in general across the industry with adoption. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. One is, first of all, you have to recognize that people will use technologies that actually help them do their job on a day-to-day basis. So kind of the first rule with adoption is you have to make sure you're delivering value to that individual user. And if you go back to a little bit of the legacy of CRM, where it was about pipeline management and forecasting and activity tracking and being a database, well, those things really don't help an individual, say in customer support or a salesperson, at the point where they're talking with a customer, right? It's not, I go in as a salesperson to talk to a customer. My first thought is, gee, I wonder what my pipeline forecast is today. I'm going to talk to this person. I need to know who they are. Help me talk to them, right? So delivering value to the end user is very, very important. And I think people who have been through CRM implementations and seen the adoption challenges, they get that. But it's very hard sometimes because the business will often come down and say, well, gee, I need a better forecast. And your answer has to be, yes, I'm going to get you a better forecast. I'm going to get you a better forecast because I'm going to tell the salesperson a lot more about the person they're about to meet. And as a result, they'll be in the system. And as a result, the forecast will be better than the case where you ask the salesperson to show up at the end of the week and update some data into a system, right? So first of all, you've got to deliver value to the individual. Very, very important key piece of it. Next, the whole conversation we just had about it's not just technology, it's about process. Really, really key. If you haven't figured out what your processes are, trying to put in the technology will just potentially freeze poor process into the company and make it, in fact, harder to change. And you'll have poor adoption because now you've got a system whose job it is to force people to do a poor process. And that does not make anyone happy. Right? So change management is an important part of this as well, getting the buy-in of users and understanding how they are impacted, their individual lives are impacted by the change of systems. There's a lot of key things that you have to build there. Again, deliver value to the end user, understand processes, and then work through a way of helping the users see how it's going to change their lives and make their life better, and work through a change management process. So those are kind of three things I would point to that are going to help people through CRM adoption.
So what about the notion of a company developing the mindset of being service-oriented to its customers and really thinking about how delivering the value to the customers? How does that all play into this notion, this broader notion of CRM as relationship?
Yeah, no, really good question, because ultimately, if your goal here is to create a great experience, you've got to get people thinking about what it's like for a buyer to come in and buy, as opposed to what's easy for you to do as a company selling outward. And there's something I like for that called customer journey mapping. And the idea behind a customer journey map is that you create a roadmap, a life cycle of what it's like for someone to buy from your business. And it's fascinating when you sit down with people inside a company and you say, what's it like to buy from us? And you ask them to tell the story from the other side. It's interesting. You don't necessarily have to go out and interview your customers to get the answer. Quite frequently, your employees know where you're making life more difficult, but they just don't have a way to kind of express it in a way that the business understands. And I like this concept of creating a customer journey map, because it's about the outward view in, and it gets everyone's mindset thinking about how they, what it's like for your customer to buy from you and create an experience. But really that flip, because the first reaction from anyone is, gee, if you change a process or change something, my job gets harder or my job gets different. And that's a challenge, right? Of course. But if you switch the mindset to, well, what's it like for the poor person buying from us, right? Well, we don't want to make their life harder. And by the way, we've all been buyers. This is why CRM is such a great business to be in. We all buy things as individuals, so we're all used to the concept. Think about your own experience. Would you want to go through what a company, we as a company put someone through, right? You think about that, and you get people thinking in that mindset, and it becomes very important for, becomes a key way of getting people in that customer experience mindset.
Okay, so you're mentioning journey mapping. How, again, I keep coming back to this notion of how do you get people inside a company to flip that mindset, as you described, to be empathetic towards the customer, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to change the relationship with the customer, and then technology can support that, but it has to be the people working in the business and
yes.
how they're interacting with the customer.
Yes, it has to be the people working in the business, and this customer journey map exercise is one of the ways you can go through that, because it forces everyone to flip that mindset. But you've got to get people thinking about what it's like for someone from the outside coming in. What is their role? How do they work with someone? What does it do to people? And other things you can do there, for example, are you can start measuring the customer experience. So Net Promoter Score, NPS, if people are familiar with that, is a great way to do that. You ask a person how likely they would be to recommend the company to someone else. And it's a very strict measure. You have to have a very high rating on NPS. You have to have a very high likelihood that someone will recommend you to get you a high rating there. But you can start measuring it. I love the idea of measuring at every step there. We do it all the time, and I encourage customers to do it. So measure the customer experience. That's one way you can do it. Tie people's performance to that. Tie rewards to that. We often see this in call centers, by the way. This is a great example. So sometimes in the call center world, people will apply the metric of time to resolution. It's all about getting the person off the phone the fastest. But in fact, if you change the resolution to the result and the measurement to customer satisfaction, you can get a much better outcome. And it isn't about how quickly you get someone off the phone. It's about how happy they are at the end of the experience. That can make a huge difference. So putting the right metrics in place. The same thing applies across the sales team and those sales metrics. So you may look and say, gee, is it about activity, or is it about the success of the customer as they purchase and onboard? And getting more success oriented and less activity oriented in your metrics make a big difference there. So that's some of the things you can do.
So elaborate on that a little bit. When you say success, so you're talking about really considering what are the things that we're measuring so that we get the outcomes that we want, as opposed to just, well, we're busy doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so some of the things you want to measure. So I mentioned Net Promoter Score. So how likely is a customer to recommend you? That's a very, very good one. So you can ask that at multiple points in time in the cycle and throughout the process. Next, customer references. Have they recommended to you? How many people are they bringing you into? Okay, that's an important thing to track and measure. So we look at things like that as well, right? There are all of these elements that you want to find that are not just did they buy more or when did they purchase. Support queries and satisfaction there are really key. Those are some places you measure. So there's a whole set of these things that I just encourage people to look at and understand and survey and ask your customers. What are they thinking? What was their response to each step in the experience? So ask those questions frequently, ask them at each step, ask for their recommendations there as well. And by the way, all of those things help with engagement. You want to keep you in the front of your customer's mind as happier. So if you're asking the right questions there, you're helping keep them engaged, and it's going to lead to a stronger relationship with them as well.
So customer engagement is a hot buzzword these days. What does that actually mean? And how is that related or different from CRM, customer relationship management?
Good question. So customer engagement. So I think of customer engagement as the degree to which you have mind share with the customer and the degree to which they are interacting and operating with you. So are they engaged with you? Are they talking to you? Are they explaining their business problems to you? Right? Are they interacting with you? So Twitter is an example of that. Are they a supporter of you on Twitter? Are they interacting with you on Twitter? Likewise on other forums. So to what degree are they working with you? And I think of engagement as a measure of satisfaction. Right? So if they're asking you questions, if they're helping other people understand your business, they're engaged. If they're silent, if they're quiet, they're not responding to surveys, well, they're not thinking about you, and they don't care enough, right? And those are not engaged customers, and you have to understand why they're not engaged. Are they dissatisfied? Are you not serving their need? Have you not made your solution an important part of what they need to do or their life? So you have to figure that out. That is a piece of overall customer satisfaction and the customer experience. That would be CRM is the bigger component. But yeah, engagement and enabling engagement is a key part of that customer satisfaction, and the level of engagement, I think, is a key measure of customer satisfaction.
Okay, so we have customers now who are actively engaged, but what we haven't yet spoken about is this idea of the empowered consumer. So link that in now.
Yeah, so the way people buy has changed, okay? Consumers, it used to be that when we bought, the way we got information about products came from relatively controlled channels. You think about it, what did you do? You picked up a magazine that maybe had a set of reviews, right? And you could look through that, and we all know that you know, to some degree, that information you're getting, it may be independent, but you know, those people are also buying advertising dollars there, right? And also the other way you got information was ads, you know, watching on TV, radio, magazine, whatever it was, and the company is controlling that channel. So whether it's a review, a product review, lists of products, those channels were all relatively constrained. The way people get information about products and companies today is wide open. The buying process has changed. Companies can no longer control those channels of information. So the consumer today, who do they go to? Well, odds are there's whatever you want to buy, there's at least one and probably multiple people on the internet who have created entire websites to buying exactly that one thing that you want to buy. And they're going to give you some deep, deep analysis from the users, right? And the internet has enabled us to find that as consumers today. In the past, we didn't have that resource. Finding that person, you know, was hard. Maybe you got lucky and you knew a friend or a colleague who you know, very much cared about the product area you were looking at and was able to give you a recommendation. But that was luck, because your ability to reach and find that person was limited. Today with the internet, you can find those people everywhere. You can find that, and just think of anything you've bought recently. What do? You go online, you do a search, you find a forum, you find the reviews, and you look for the reviews in places that you know are neutral, where you find people like you who are talking about a product, right? And you get the real experience from them. That process has changed, and companies have to learn they don't have that control today. And the consumer, the buyer, has much, much more power because of it. And companies have to learn to be authentic and part of that process and participate in it, but recognize they can't control it today. And the customer experience becomes even more important, because your advisors are the people selling for your product today and telling are your customers. Yeah.
So what does this mean then for something like CRM? Because in the old days, you know, the salesperson called up the customer, they logged it in the CRM system, they move on, and it's done. Now, if I, as a seller, want to have a relationship with a customer, with a potential buyer, it means that I've got to be spreading my efforts much more broadly to understand a more all-encompassing view of that buyer.
Yes, yes. But it also means that as a seller, you have access to more information about that buyer, and you can also potentially come into the sales cycle with a more educated buyer. And it means the way that you reach the buyer as a company, you need to think about that life cycle earlier in the process. So typically today, when a buyer shows up, they've done a lot of research. They understand the product and the business space a lot more. That means you as a company have to spend a lot more time in the education phase, in providing information to consumers earlier on in the process before they start talking to a seller. And then as a seller, you want the seller to understand what information the buyer has already had access to. So you think about it in the context of CRM, what white papers has this person read? What webinars have they attended? So what have they done to educate themselves? That's going to tell the seller a lot about what the buyer cares about and knows. And a good seller will build on that as opposed to repeat it. So again, you're creating the right experience for the buyer by giving a smarter seller or giving a seller more intelligence so they can get right to the point that the buyer cares about. The buyer doesn't want to listen to a lot of stuff they already know or a lot of things that are irrelevant. By giving them intelligence, they can get right to the point. And that actually helps the seller a lot in the sense that the sales cycle can be shorter. Their time is that they're making their time highly effective as opposed to wasting it discovering things that they already should know because of the way the buyer has engaged with the business before. And it's that digital and human connection that becomes critical for CRM. You know, Michael, a lot of people talk about the digital component of that today because most businesses need to get there. They need to get there where the information is available digitally and enable the buyer to come in. But what they forget is that that has to connect to the human, because all the surveys show that the most effective part of the cycle is still people still want to talk to people. And it isn't that we want to do we want no human interaction. It's we want the human interaction that's relevant, and we don't want the irrelevant part of the human interaction in the buying process, right? And connecting the digital to the human becomes critical in the CRM system, and that's I'd say that's something that's changed as this buying experience and buying process has changed.
Okay, so connect, we only have about 10 minutes left, and this is a very interesting topic. So connect, maybe elaborate more on how we can connect the digital to the human in order to deepen these customer relationships.
Yes, so typically on the digital side, the buyer will have come in, say on a website, and they're going to leave fingerprints behind on that website. They're going to visit various pages. They're going to download, as I said, white papers. They will have looked at places in the forum. They may have watched a webinar, learned about a product in that process. So there's a set of activities they have done there. Now, at some point, they're going to transition to being ready to buy something. And you want to detect that point and understand it. They may raise a flag, which is the I want to talk to a person now button on your website. It may be a virtual flag or a intelligent flag that is raised by the system by looking at the combination of all those interactions on the website and saying, hey, you know, this person is now at the point where they're going to buy. It's the right time to reach out to them. In either case, that needs to flow into a system that enables that interaction, that enables now a human to either reach out, okay, and you present to that person, and this is what a good CRM system will do for that person. It'll say, okay, it'll give them a picture of the person that interacted on the website. It'll tell them where and how they interacted, and it will offer them, offer the person, the employee inside your company, a set of options for how they interact. Do I try and call this person? If I call this person, what do I say? Do I send them an email? If I send them an email, what are the options for what I should say based on what they're interested in? And by the way, it usually takes more than one email or phone call to connect with a person. So when do I send the first email? When do I make the first call? Help manage that process. So create a sequence of human connection that is highly relevant to the specific individual that may involve both phone, email, even Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. What's the right way to connect and interact with them? So the system will provide that information. will help the user track it, help the user understand it, and help the salesperson then stay in sequence with that.
So,
and we'll also so you're helping that salesperson plan that interaction. And then when you actually make those connections, you will at that point have a lot of information about the user, what they care about, and the system should help you understand this is the product they care about, this is the information they need, and you make that interaction highly effective and valuable as opposed to talking about something that's irrelevant to that particular buyer.
Okay, so think about the human relationship, think about the channels,
yes,
think about where you can use technology to make it more efficient, more consistent, create journey maps to help understand those interactions.
Yes.
But now I have about an hour or two of questions that I would like to continue asking you, but we have 5 minutes, and so let me just jump from
By the way, Michael,
topic to topic.
That's the great thing about these, Michael. This is a topic where we can go on for literally an hour or two. It's fascinating now, but given the time left, what do we do?
Okay, so let me ask you just about a bunch of different things, and maybe just give short answers, so at least we'll get a sense of some of these things. How's that?
Okay. Fire away.
So mobile. Mobile's very important to salespeople. What's the story with mobile? What's the story?
Key experience. It has to lead today. People are on the road all the time. The other thing to think about there is simple, short applications that help you with a specific task, because the use cases are different. When you're traveling, it's different than when you're in front of a desktop. So think about different use cases, but it has to lead. Most people will be on mobile first before the desktop.
So if you're developing software, that's what you need to be thinking about. And if you're a mobile salesperson, what is it that you need?
If you're a mobile salesperson, what you need are small, simple apps that help you as you go into specific tasks. I'm about to walk into a meeting. Great. Tell me what I need to know to walk into that meeting, right? I don't care about everything else. I don't care about pipelining, forecast, all the other things I could potentially do. What I care about is who's in this meeting, what do I need to say for them? When I'm leaving the meeting, okay, what do I need to follow up? How do I follow up from that? What are the activities or tasks that I need to take out of that? That's what salespeople do. And you go into a meeting, you prepare for it, you set a set of action items, you come out of that meeting. Those are simple use cases that you need to do on the run. And you don't want those use cases cluttered by forecast and pipeline and opportunity management and all the other CRM stuff around it. So think how you give those simple use cases. Quick plug, we acquired a company called Stitch, by the way, in this space that does exactly that kind of stuff, specifically for this purpose, because we see that as an important use case.
Okay, tell me how to sell more. How can those of us listening sell more? What's your advice?
Know your buyer. Okay, who do people buy from? They buy from people they trust. They buy from their friends. What is the most difficult objection to overcome when asked, why did you buy from him and not me? It's because the other person was my friend. Get to know them, understand what they care about, not just in their business, but them personally, right? How is this purchase going to help them with their job, their career? How is it going to help them? So really know them well, okay? Connect with them. Don't just sell to them, listen a lot. Number one mistake salespeople make is they want to talk too much, okay? Turn it around. In the early days of talking to that buyer, you should be doing 10% of the talking and they should be doing 90%. Okay, so there, follow that, that'll help.
Okay, so if you're doing all the talking and you're not selling.
Yes,
you're not listening.
Right. That's right. Counterintuitive sometimes, right? Because
Well,
we want to show up and we want to start talking to sell, but in fact, listening is the key piece that most people lose.
Listen to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Listen more, sell more.
There you go. I like that. Good soundbite.
Okay, and finally, give us a short sales pitch about SugarCRM.
Short sales pitch about SugarCRM. So, SugarCRM, we're going to provide you with the best customer relationship management system for helping empower your sales team. We are the only company that is largely focused on the CRM space. So the large pure play, this is all we care about. All we care about is CRM and creating a great customer experience. We're going to deliver a huge amount of innovation to help the seller sell there and a fantastic user experience for them. And we're going to enable you as a business to create this great experience for your customers by enabling all of your employees to understand what's happening with that customer, to orchestrate a process across divisions, across employees, so your customer gets one seamless, consistent experience that they love and ultimately increases their value to you as a customer.
Fantastic. And how about one very quick real last question?
Real last question.
Because given your background, you were truly a pioneer in open source software, and we didn't talk about that at all. So maybe just 1 minute on open source software.
1 minute on open source software. If you look at the technology landscape today, it's interesting. Open source has transitioned from something that we all talked about in leading, used to have open source conferences, to something that people talk about very little, but in fact is the reason so many startups exist and empowers so much of what people do today. At SugarCRM, we would not have been able to create such a powerful system without relying on open source technology underneath. If you look at the entire cloud, Amazon AWS exists because of open source. Google Android exists because of open source. Apple iOS, huge amount of open source components at its core. Next time you go to a smart TV, go into the menu on the TV and go down, and there's probably a menu that says license or about or something like that. You pull that up, you're going to see open source licenses listed there, because the software that powers that TV or your car or your cell phone or many of those devices that powers the Internet of Things, it's all open source underneath. We wouldn't have any of those technologies without open source having driven them. So it's a huge part of our technology life today, but we don't see it because it's under the covers.
Open source is everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And with that, I want to thank Larry Augustin, who is the CEO of SugarCRM, for being our guest on episode number 124 of CXOTalk. Larry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. It's been fun.
And everybody, we're going to do another show tomorrow, and then we have another show on Friday. So come back, and to my co-host, Vala Afshar, wherever you are, I hope life is good. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.